What's up, everyone? Today we have the pleasure of sitting down with Maja Voje, founder of Growth Labs and the author of GTM Strategist. Maja started her career bouncing from government consulting, journalist intern, and program manager roles, and she then kickstarted her entrepreneurial journey and launched Growth Lab, an early version of her consultancy where she moonlighted as a consultant. She also worked at Google on speech ops, where she led a team of 9 on a globally coordinated technology project. She later worked for various startups across London and Brussels, leading marketing, comms, and growth strategy. And she worked remotely for a Web3 blockchain startup based in Hong Kong. And she took on the role of CMO, where she raised over $20 million in growth capital and attracted 16,000 early adopters. She's also a mentor at the Swiss Entrepreneurship Program, and she's the author of the acclaimed and best-selling GTM Strategist, a comprehensive guide on launching a new product and gaining product market fit. And today she's doubled down on her consultancy, Growth Lab, where she's worked with brands like Heineken, Bayer, Miro, and Product Led. She's also taught growth principles to more than 50,000 students around the world, including employees from Tesla, Apple, Deloitte, Adidas. Maja, what a wild and amazing journey. Thank you so much for your time today.
I don't know what to say, because at one point I feel a bit very old when you are reading this, right? So there was a lot of history to unpack here. But on the second hand, I would just have you on all the world stages that I'm on, because you do a much better job in introducing me than I could possibly do. So congrats, high five, and let's get this flowing.
Awesome. Appreciate that. Let's get going. I've got a cool question to start us off with. I would love to know, for all the listeners that are aspiring Majas out there who want to be a CMO one day or want to be a growth advisor in a couple of years, what should they be working on today?
Fantastic. My main boring advice would be to stick around for some time, because a lot of times I see people doing a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and not really experiencing the entire journey. But the wisdom comes from just going through this stage of launch planning to just executing the launch. And that's crazy time. This is the time when you eat pizza and drink your monster drink. And then just making sure that whatever we did there is scalable and repetitive. So I really think that the wisdom of leading this team to just see a couple of those patterns. And personally, I just see it as paid learning period. Of course, you will have to work your ass off, but the plus side is that, first of all, you're not playing with your own money, which is important, and you're not playing it alone. You can have mentors, you have team members, you have this wonderful polygon to learn. And I would just say that before you are 3 to 5 years in business, I don't think that you could be as fierce but just the pattern recognition side of the business than afterwards. So grind first, consult later would be my best advice, but don't hold yourself trapped by your imposter syndrome or whatever this, because once you have achieved something, the probability, just the chance that you can do this 3 or 5 times more is incredible, because you know the pattern, you have lived the path, and you are just changing the client in your head. So do a little bit of intermediate if you have to, be a mentor, be just a little bit of a part-time consultant, and see if it works for you, because this lifestyle is a little bit different and it's not for everybody, but it's sweet. It's really sweet. And once you're into the game, you really have to focus on just making sure that you still have a very good connection with the industry. We're not saying stuff which is 5 years old or something like that, because you don't want to do this. This would make you a dinosaur and obsolete. But at the same time, to just when you learn something, could we multiply this? Could we help more people by just using the same framework or something like that? And that makes me passionate about my work.
I love this concept of pattern recognition, right? As you've done your first few years in business and marketing, you kind of get these reps in where you start to be able to recognize these patterns. At the outset of your book, one of the things that you make a really great point about, is simplicity. And I think one thing that teams and folks who don't have a lot of experience in marketing and growth do is they try to boil the ocean, right? There's all these things and cool, shiny objects, but I think like the best folks like yourself are recommending simple strategies because they work. Why is it so hard for us marketers to keep things simple? And how do you help teams to recognize the value of simplicity in go-to-market strategies?
I have a 2-layer answer here. First part you will like, the second one you will not. So the part of the answer that you will like is that sometimes the smarter you get, the more you complicate, right? The more you know your product, the more variables that you can think about in this equation, the more likely it is that you're going to come up with a really complicated plan and make your life a living hell by just like being in this analysis paralysis, not doing shit, and just like going to your rabbit hole of learning and constant overthinking about what is going on without anything being launched on the market. And this is like the curse of intelligent. So the second thing is just like, when you are like in a bigger company or something like that, GTM comes with a bunch of responsibility. And sometimes it is easier to surround yourself with like 5 different consultants, with like different team members or something like that, to just like prolong this responsibility of decision maker, right? And here it's very, very important to create safe space for decision making, because we will get it wrong a lot of times. We can try, but we shouldn't be punished because there are more unknowns as knowns in our go-to-market journey. And that makes the best organizations in which the best like GTM science is being made, when like failing is learning and we are doing experimentation, we are using scientific method, and we are just trying to be a little bit better, a little bit wiser every single day. So it's very, very, very culture related as well. Hope that helps.
One of the things that I find like kind of frustrating as a digital marketer, particularly when I was in-house and trying to learn the trade of being, going to market and having growth strategies. Like I started my career in growth and spent 6 years working at a startup, and things were going really good there. Like we're getting funding, and we had all this momentum. And then in a later life, I worked at a startup where growth wasn't happening. It was tough, right? We're doing GTM strategy after GTM strategy and nothing's landing. It was frustrating, right? Because all the case studies out there are really focused on the unicorn companies, like, hey, build a great product and everything else will happen. But what if your product is good but not great? And I know you've got a lot of lessons from working in gritty startups and working with gritty teams. Like, what lessons do you learn from these gritty days of startup marketing that you can apply to your GTM strategies?
The first one is that product is never going to be good enough. There's always something that you can fix. There is always an excuse that you can spend like another 3 months or something like that in your office and make it more perfect. But this is like the trap of overdoing things, right? The sooner you can go to market and just like get these feedback loops of customers, the more likely it is that your GTM is going to be successful. And sometimes product per se, because we are touching on this field of product market fit question at the moment, sometimes product is not even a problem. Sometimes we don't know what to say in order to attract the right customers. Sometimes we are targeting the wrong market segment, and in another different segment geographically or just like sociographically, it could be okay. But in this one is not. So I'm always saying that this is like a moving target, that there are like a lot of different iterations. And just like I like to start small by just like doing these things that don't necessarily scale. For example, posting to social media groups. I was like working with one CRM. This is like Martech podcast. So I will be very generous with this type of examples today. So there was like this CRM, which is AI assisted, and it helped founders to do whatever. I know it's boring because you have heard this speech for like 50 times already. But hey, we posted this invite for their beta in a Facebook group of 10,000 people, and more than 100 people joined. It was like a really nicely written post, and it was just like the first 100 users that they got. And based on reverse engineering their data, they soon realize that they don't stand a fighting chance in e-commerce and just like in larger service businesses. However, the segment that they can serve are just like these solo entrepreneurs, consultants, and people who know that they should have CRM, but they really don't have it because it's just like a decision that they are prolonging. And their pitch became just like, okay, let us do your hard work for you. Let us remove the hassle out of the thing that you love, which is your business. This was the first iteration. Then they applied for Y Combinator based on the 500 signups that we got based on their beta, but they actually started selling. They actually started to do demos and they secured, I think, 10 or 20K of monthly recurring revenue for just like having a product which didn't exactly existed. But upon further research, they went and they pivoted in this AI enablement of CRMs, other CRMs, because they discovered that they don't want to build another CRMs, right? So was this a failure? No. Every iteration was a huge success because they learned a bunch and they actually generated a couple of clients, a couple of like monthly recurring revenues. And I think it was a huge success. But little did we know when we started out that this is how it's going to play out. So my message here is just like the speed of iteration. You cannot overstudy this. You have to let your product out in the wild and just like do it. Another example, another like vivid example that I can share. Just like today, I was talking with a friend of mine who is like a big expert in email marketing, right? And there is like this big change in email availability right now. I'm sure that you know it. And like, are the settings right and what so not? So what the guys did is that they scraped data from Facebook ads library and just like somehow figure it out who doesn't have the right types of settings, and their email outreach campaign is going to be like, hey, we identified that this is not right in your software. This is how we can help you. Would you pay us 100 euros in order to settle this out for you? I'm sure that it is going to be a smashing success because they are hitting on an immediate pain point in the right point of time. And what I'm saying here is really that this is like something that you cannot copy, something which is very proprietary and very like ambiguous to the companies. And you just have to go out there, talk to users, think a little bit subversively, not copying another HubSpot or whatnots, because this is not going to work. This is not going to work in 2024.
Great answers there. I love the two examples. Both of those are close to my heart. Like we had a full episode on the email marketing Google Sender guideline changes coming up, but also the CRM example. I spent a full year and a half working for a CRM startup. They're a bootstrap company called Close CRM. And it was an interesting journey, like with all the sea of CRMs and all the different like verticals, like CRM for this vertical and that vertical, like real estate and like CVs and portfolios and blah, blah, blah. So I can imagine how tricky it was, but I love this idea of like the advice you said around like just get something out there, get some feedback, get that loop going so that you can make that pivot. Like how do you do a pivot without having that information? And I feel like in your book, you also apply this to like once you've got an idea of the target market, where you're going, you want to start driving more customers there. So whether you're posting that on Facebook groups or you're trying to go through one of the first channels, like you've shared that there's 7 key channels and you recommend that early on teams should focus on picking like 2 or 3 of those in that first like 3 to 18 months of the startup journey, instead of like chasing new hot trends. Like we said, shiny objects are definitely like a thorn in our side in Martech. But the 7 that you have in your book are inbound, outbound, paid, community, partners, ABM, and product-led growth. And I wanted to get your take on this. So like, I feel like we scope the time horizon down in your book to like 3 to 18 months, right? And we almost have to rule out, in my opinion, like inbound and community, because SEO and building an audience, while very important, in that first 3 to 18 months, there's such long tail investments that you won't see the fruits of like all of that labor for many months after that, or even like a year plus. JT can speak on that, being an SEO. But like, have you seen companies get results in such a short time horizon with community? Like maybe your example there of just like posting on a Facebook group for the beta program is one of them, but curious like what you think there.
So that was an external community. This is not a community that I've built. Okay, I did build it, but isn't the community that the company built. But nevertheless, the point is that if you can go where the audience is, it's going to be much faster. Even if you scrape like Upwork or something like that, or G2 reviews or something like that, wherever you have a critical mass, it's going to be much faster. I'm a huge opponent of SEO myself, but I've been proven wrong before. In some categories, just like people are averse readers and they really want to consume stuff. So I'm not saying that Martech is one of those, because in the majority of cases, it's very difficult to just like compete against Pipedrive, Cognism, HubSpots, and whatnot. I mean, those beasts are SEO savvy, and on the like main keywords, you cannot outbid them. However, I would still let myself a prerogative if there is something which is really undervalued where I have a fighting chance to do. And I wouldn't do it personally, and I wouldn't let any of my teams do this, but I've seen this example, so we can just not completely exclude them and say, no, SEO is trash, we cannot do this. The same goes with inbound, because with inbound, there are emerging channels and there are just like these algorithmic pushes when you win if you are just there in the right time and space, right? So for example, right now it's YouTube Shorts and TikTok is cringe for me because I'm like 36 and I mean, apart from some cooking recipes and Australian Shepherd videos, I don't use it very much. I think it's screen sucking and it's terrible for your brain, but call me old all you want. So it's just like, for example, LinkedIn. LinkedIn is hugely important in our vertical. Why? We don't necessarily expect the immediate result, but we have to consider the broader buyer journey as well, right? So, for example, today I'm talking with Jonathan and Phil, and of course, I will check you out on LinkedIn, right? If you are even real people or just like some bots who are sending yes. So it's how we create trust and how we just like decide whether somebody is relevant, if somebody is like trustworthy or something like that. So I'm all up for cosmetics. However, that gets really cringe when it comes to founder branding. Everybody's saying that like building is public is very beneficial, but I will tell you how it is. It takes 2 or 3 hours a day. And if you have a clear indication from customers that they spend a lot of time on LinkedIn and that they have like are very inspired how to find your technologies on LinkedIn, that's fine. That's an investment that might be worthy. If you get like 20 or 30% of your leads through LinkedIn, of course you want to spend some time there, right? But if you are just like starting out, I would always 100% prioritize other people's communities and just like piggybacking on somebody else's traction before I go and invest these long hours and sweat and tears into building my own content stream, because it really is a long game. And I mean, I'm really feeling for my people. So we are overwhelmed. We have like gazillion of choices. We have very limited opportunities that we can start, and we have to be right. And how to be right is to literally ask your customers, how do they find this information, and go there. You can do other stuff later on, but this is what you're doing 80% of the time.
Very cool. So to unpack that, like your answer is almost like that inbound, the SEO stuff, like it's important to do, but like some of the first things initially is to find communities that are existing, that have traction already. So it's almost like you're doing outbound in a sense, like you're going on these other communities. Maybe you're posting about beta or
I'm very
for
pro
feedback
outbound,
or
though.
something like that. Okay. Yeah, definitely. And different outbound than, like a lot of the outbound teams that are going to suffer in the next couple of months with the Google Sender guideline changes. You're going outbound to communities that exist already, and the audience lives there. They're going to find value in what you're posting about versus like cold email, cold outbound. There is still like value in that channel, but like you're focusing more on this community angle.
Kind of. And there is one important nuance that we have to talk about is, so always give before you get. Because if you come in an online community and just like, hey, we're launching this on Product Hunt, why don't you upload for us? That's spam. like, I mean, you're intruder in their community and nobody's going
Yeah.
to celebrate your appearance there. However, if you
Yeah.
just like spend a couple of weeks before and just like give a couple of useful information, it's either a value comment or a value post, your post is going to be accepted much better. And if you have the chance to just like get the blessing from admin if they are active, it's even better because this is admin approved and nobody can argue with that. So just like for first 500 customers, this is my go-to answer because people are there actively searching for information, actively just like investigating what will be the best choice for them. So this for me is where the attention is, and it's kind of a no-brainer in my stack.
I think in your book, you mention this quite a bit and draw on like military lessons, and it's kind of a neat little sub-theme that works throughout the book. But like this idea of drawing from special forces where they have this concentration of firepower. Like in my own career, I've seen it quite often where folks are like, yeah, like all of these tactics are cool. Like as Phil mentioned, I'm an SEO, but like, yeah, I've seen great results from SEO, but in the first 3 to 18 months of you're just trying to get this ship off the ground, is it the best choice? It might be, but you have to be able to make those decisions that make sense for concentrating your energy. How do you coach teams on this? How do you get people to understand where are their strengths? Where does their product find a natural affinity with one of the channels that you've mentioned?
Cool. So I already touched upon this. It's always about like serving the existing customers and prospect. So we need single source of truth. And this is usually like some sort of either competition analysis when they are getting the best traffic and the best customers, or we do our own analysis. And I mean, with data, I can argue much better that this is it, that we should post like 80% of our attention, our resources there and be fierce. And I love what you said about just like this intensity, this magnitude, because in reality, we are very little, but we have to strike big. And I was fighting against this actually, like when we were selling gaming computers and there was just like this weird shortage of GPU parts. And it was like a really weird time in history. So nobody had like the memory cards and graphic cards in stock, but everybody tried to ride the momentum. So we were just like, listen, now we hire 16 influencers. We tell them exactly what time should they publish this, and it will look like for a brief moment, but it will look like to our audience that we are everywhere. So that's kind of a magnitude that we were trying to create, even though in reality we were a little bit like confused. And I saw this the same going on in B2B space, because I think that influencer space in B2B is so undervalued. I mean, if you have a report and you just like hire a couple of like different B2B players that will be pushing this report out, I think that you can have this awesome traction that money cannot buy, but not only traction, also credibility, right? Also just like this momentum. So I do believe that there are a lot of underutilized opportunities, but the main question remains, where do people get relevant data for their decision making? So a lot of times in marketing, I see we should be doing like 3 blog posts, we should be doing like 7 LinkedIn posts, we should be doing this and that and that. And these are just like output metrics. These are just like, this is actually work. This is actually work. It's not connected with results. So this is input in your process. However, the question which is better to ask is, how can we get, let's say, 1,000 leads? How can we get like 2,000 additional users? How can we get like 5 additional partners from Scandinavia regions and whatnot? And I think that we are asking the wrong questions.
I love that point. I think, seeing the forest for the trees type of thing, right? Like we're easy to jump into the tactics of what we do because it feels good to be productive and to produce something. But is it connected to the results or not? And just drawing back on something you were saying earlier, like this idea of failure, right? And continuous learning. One of the thoughts that I had as you were talking is this idea of like productizing your failures, right? Or that iteration. Maybe failure is too strong of a word, but just the idea of having this continuous iteration and learning. when it comes to product market fit, you talk about it being a moving target. How can this iterative cycle of learning from the market, learning from, how your initial customers are coming on board, how can it be, how do you see it in terms of being a moving target? How can marketers think about this?
Okay. The first thing to untact is to have a really good metrics and analytics, right? So you need to know what does product market fit look like for you. And I don't care if you use conversion rates in order to measure it. Ideally, you would use retention rates and just like smarter metrics than these. But if you see for 2 or 3 months in a row that your conversion rate is just plummeting, I would react even sooner. So there are a couple of indications. Just like, you know how it is when you are tracking these mechanisms, you can react. And I rather perceive this sooner than later. So I definitely want to have my measurements in place. And once could be like a random thing, but when it is a repetitive sample, I would definitely be proactive to investigate and later on react. So step number 1 is to measure it. Step number 2 is to just like find the right thing which is going on here, right? Because a lot of times I see companies panicking, okay, whoa, this conversion rate is plummeting, now we should run a discount or something like that. But it is not the right reaction. This is not the ground cause of what is going on. Maybe there is an additional competitor. Maybe there is somebody who's like literally eating the cream out of your market in order to optimize for adoption, and you have to fight a little bit differently. So make sure that you understand the ground reason why this is going on. And then really observe the churn. Who are the customers that are going away from you and where? Exit interviews and just like churn customer interviews will give you better insights than anything else that you can do in business. To just like understand what was the missing particle, why they didn't want to continue this journey with you, and try to work better and just like revamp these gangsters. There are other factors to the equation. So there can be a severe technological change, such as AI was in marketing tech, right? So that was a severe one, and we had to react on this. Some people sooner, some people later, we all know how it goes. But nevertheless, once we achieve product market fit, once we think that everything is okay, it can still go radically wrong. And how to correct it, step number 1 is to timely indicate it so that we are not like sugar bluffing, oh, it's a bad month, people on vacation, like maybe next month will be better, right? But that we indicate it in the right time. The second one is to identify what the hell is going on. And the third one is to just like plan the corrective measures of how can we do better.
Such a great answer. I think that understanding what is going on is a bit of an art and science, right? Like sometimes even with the best tracking in place, you mentioned conversion rate monitoring, but also retention rate monitoring. Even with the best metrics, like the best like monitoring practices and dashboards, you won't have all of the answers of what is going on. Like John and I both lived, our first startup was in a dashboard startup, and our CEO would often
Oh,
come
wow, I
tap
didn't
our
know that.
shoulders.
Cool.
Yeah, it's called Clipfolio, tiny little company in Ottawa. They're still kicking around today, but we always joke around this idea that our CEO would like tap our shoulder at like every week or so and just ask us like, why are trials down? Like why is this metric down? Why is that down? And even though we had a good understanding of is this down or is this up, we didn't have the answers on why. And I feel like that's where qualitative data comes into play a little bit here. And this ties in nicely to my next question. Like we've asked a bunch of our recent guests, this question around, does everything need to be a test? And you called this out beautifully on one of your posts on LinkedIn. And you touch on it in your book as well, that this idea that traditional experimentation often emphasizes the need for massive sample sizes. And it creates a misconception that experimentation is only this thing that large companies or teams with large traffic can actually like use and make use of. Reality is, though, that there are multiple ways to apply experimentation principles in GTM efforts beyond these like statistically significant tests, right? And one of those examples that you talk about is qualitative research. Would love for you to unpack that further.
Perfect. I'm very happy that I have a platform to talk about this because people usually hate when I start to say that maybe statistical significance is not everything and maybe that we can like pick up signals in order to make better decisions before we ever achieve statistical significance. So that's a little bit of a controversial statement, but listen, like when I'm making decision in the go-to-market stage, I have very little data to operate with, right? So what's better? It is better to just like do this prototype of an offer and send it to 10 friends? Or is it better that I just post it on like some sort of Facebook advertising campaign and see what happens? Because again, I will never understand why. For me, the winning answer always is to first learn in depth, to what is radically wrong and correct the obvious, because usually even if you bring in to 20 people in the research, 5 of them will probably say the same, right? So I'm searching for the patterns, I'm searching for the stuff which is being, and these are like the big points that I want to address. And later on, okay, I have this done now on the sample of 20 people or something like that. This is it. Now let's try to present this perfected version to 1,000 people and see what happens. So it's kind of an experimentation loop when I'm first trying to get interception, because in GTM, I don't know much, right? I don't have like years and months of data. This is like a luxury that I will have later when I will be running a real experimentation. So in the first part, it's merely an inception. And I'm just asking myself, is it inception? Or could other like 20 people confirm that I'm onto something here, right?
Mm-hmm.
When I say people, I mean ICP, ideal customer profile, not my mother, not my aunt, people that I strategically selected. Okay. Once I have these patterns going on, I can go and like test them. With the statistical significance, it has to come this, but I wouldn't be very comfortable of just like saying, okay, this is like the new software that we invented. We would like to do like open rate optimization for email marketing. This is my best attempt on a landing page. Let's roll this out. Let's put like $2,000 in order to promote this and see what happens. I would do it if I would be in e-commerce, but not in tech.
Yeah, I love that answer. Some of the recent guests we've had have kind of been playing with my mind a little bit in terms of like the how much do we test, how much do we go to market, and like you also mentioned at the outset, one of the first questions, or the first question we asked you, was about like how do you get into Maja shoes down the road? But like this idea of how many years have you spent in business? Like I think there's an aspect, and maybe you can comment on this, of intuition that comes with GTM. Like you have to see it a few times and use your instincts a little bit and trust your gut a little bit.
Maybe, but I'm being like a little bit skeptical about this. So I still want to search for my initial proof, right? Because right now in this sort of agent space, everything is like changing so fast. And what we did like 5 years ago in order to get like those 20 millions or whatnot, right now it no longer applies. And I have to live with this, right? So I might give a little bit of just like ground principles, what have worked well before, but I don't want to be this hippo in the room, you know, this person who's just like 10 years ago, we did this stuff already and we should do this again. It's very important for me to just like see if it makes sense in this environment. Pattern recognition is much easier with experience, because if you don't have like any experience, how can you find patterns? I mean, it's more difficult. But nevertheless, I am trying to use logic and evidence all the time, but also be very mindful about personal preferences of people, because they might end up self-sabotaging themselves. And what I mean with this is that if I have a technical founder who just like despises social media and would never reveal anything about themselves, then probably inbound is a little bit off for me, because just like the amount of energy and willpower that I would have to spend in order to get this guy to write a LinkedIn post, it's just not there yet. But on the second side, a lot of people are just like mortally afraid of rejection. And that's natural. This is our amygdala, brain. We don't want to be abandoned, but our tribe, we want to be liked, and we hate to say no, right? So outreach and any source of avoidance of getting a no is a big barrier as well. With my teams, I'm trying to overcome it, but it comes like in small chunks. So, okay, now we will send out 200 emails. What's the worst thing that it can happen? Okay, everybody will sign off and like people will hate us. Can we live with this? Probably. Let's do 200. The situation was not that bad that we participated. So we could probably optimize a little bit and send out the other, right? Because not everything is business is specifically rational. And sometimes, especially with the smaller teams, we come like in connection with a bunch of mental junk and just like personal things that we have to handle as well. And I'm all the time posing the question like, okay, is this your opinion or are you afraid of this? Are you self-sabotaging? Are you protecting your ego? Is that really something that you think and you want to impose this as a leader? Or do we have like a little bit of a mental junk here that we should clean?
Something I find fascinating that I'm going to tease out of that is just this idea of identifying your own biases. Like my career, I've had a lot of success with content, inbound, SEO, and a phrase we're using with AI is like when you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. But I feel like there's this rebuilding process. Like if you start a fresh company in a GTM role, you've got to almost, you have your biases, your intuition, your experience, but you also have to look at it with a very fresh set of eyes. How do you kind of go about this mental reset with teams when you're coming in and you're helping them? Like, hey, I know this is what worked. I know you don't like social media. You don't like outbound. Like it's all distasteful, but you're growing a business here. Like this is the best channel for you to go out to. Like, how do you approach that with your teams?
Okay, first step is great. Just like, oh, wow, this competitor is doing this and that. Are you sure that we are not missing out because we are not active on this channel? Why don't we launch? And the second one is just like to frame them in a very, very, very manageable experiment that we could run. So based on this webinar that you did last week, would it be okay for you to just like do a couple of snippets and then we would post and just like see what happens? Luckily, usually the algorithms has this like first time content creator push and it's appealing for them to just like see the results, or we can like engineer the results a little bit. It's not a problem if we think it's bad, good for the founder. And I would just like little by little and reward everything. This is the basic thing when it comes to like not only human, but also like animal training, right? Because our brain is pretty much the same. So we are afraid of punishment, but whenever like the stressor will go away and we will no longer receive the punishment, our behavior will remain the same. However, if we are gradually awarded for what we are doing and like admit it to just like these small things that we are doing, they are piling up and our behavior could radically change. I mean, I have 2 dogs at home. We will talk about this later, but this is how I did like the training of a T-Rex called Australian Shepherd. And it was never about like, this is wrong. This is what I told. It was always like reward, and ignore the rest. So not saying that people and animals are very much alike, which they maybe are, but nevertheless, it's just like see the good. And when it comes to the catastrophe, just don't let it be a catastrophe. Do damage control in advance. Do badges.
Very cool answer. I feel like there's a rebrand of the show maybe instead of humans of Martech, it's animals of Martech. But I want to go back to one of your...
Go.
I want to go back to one of your previous answers. You talked about the importance in qualitative research to chat with your ICP and not with your mom or your grandma. And those are different types of feedback early on. And I love the concept in your book about early customer profiles versus ideal customer profiles when you're early in that GTM motion. So your first customer may not look exactly like your ICP. It's sort of a mix of GTM strategies and crossing the chasm a little bit there, but would love your take on the types of Martech decisions needed when you're going after these early customers. We talked about like throwing that in existing communities, asking for beta, or like building in public a little bit, posting a little bit on social media. But like from those early scrappy days where we can grow a company to go after quite different markets, how can marketers kind of future-proof their tech choices as they're scaling up?
I would go in the grounds of just like understanding the mentality of an early adopter, right? I'm an early adopter myself. So whenever I see like a product in demo, of course I'm going to give it a shot. I'm going to be very generous, very annoying even sometimes with my feedback, because this is what I like. This is my freaking hobby. Very much genuinely love to test out new technologies. And there are a lot of people in tech, in marketing, who are just like, have this fright of being the first one to discover something and having been like heard by founders in order to just like get this consultancy gig, what is going on there. And yes, you can totally get them on Product Hunt. You can get them in online communities. They are sometimes very active and vocal on LinkedIn as well. And it's more of just like this shiny object syndrome. So there is something going on in the industry. I don't want to miss out on this. And this is just like either these people who are very much adventurous about their technology consumption, or people that have very little to lose. So these are usually early adopters. These are usually like solo entrepreneurs. So people who just like to have something for free and hope that it will fix their problems, right? And that could easily turn out to be anti-persona after you go and just like win the higher market share, right? Because those solopreneurs or like whatever indie developers were hooked by your product initially, I mean, they are valuable community members. You will always be grateful for their feedback or something like that. But it's very unlikely that you are going to build your $1 million business based on this specific client base. So it's very important to just like whenever you start monetizing, reverse engineer who are the people who actually come back to the product and are actually willing to pay for it. I have a beautiful example. I was talking with Enzo Vigo with June.so, and he said that his early adopters were just like indie developers, but whoever ended up to pay for this were B2B SaaS owners. And it was pivot that happened immediately after they introduced the monetization layer. And this is why I love to say, okay, they might say that they love it, but will they pay for it?
Very cool. Yeah, this idea of being willing to pay for it and monitoring the folks that are coming back, and like when you do start monetizing it, they open their wallets and they're interested in paying for it. You have a whole chapter in your book actually dedicated to pricing, and you cover willingness to pay. For folks that aren't familiar with it, it's like the maximum amount a customer is ready and willing to pay for your product. I've heard a lot of folks kind of say that it's not a very reliable or straightforward metric. And I'm going to like debate this with you a little bit. I'm going to play the role of like willingness to pay
Go.
is not something
I
you
love
should
it.
really
It's my
think
favorite
of.
subject, literally.
Okay, love it. So there's 4 arguments on like why it's not straightforward and not that reliable. So number 1 is that it's based on self-reported data. Surveys are unreliable and preferences can be a lot different when it comes time to actually make a purchase versus when you're just like filling out a survey. Willingness to pay, number 2, willingness to pay assumes that consumers make rational decisions, but we know that humans are very rarely rational beings. And this is especially true in Martech when, SaaS, there's a buying committee and there's like pre-existing preferences and biases for certain tooling. Number 3 is that willingness to pay is often seen as this static number, but really it's a customer's willingness to pay can fluctuate based on a bunch of factors impacting their business. And number 4, willingness to pay tends to focus on individual purchases rather than considering the lifetime value and the potential for upsells. Curious your take on those 4 there.
My take on this is really, really, really simple. create a PDF, create like a PowerPoint presentation and try to sell it, try to pre-sell it. People are like, shut up and take my money. That means that you have something good going on, /
Yeah.
you're too cheap. So this is like the best willingness to test that you can possibly have. And the good news is that it actually makes you money and keeps the lights on and co-funds your development. So I'm not saying that this is always an option, but whatever, I could be like collecting pre-orders or just like pre-commitments or doing like a little bit of client co-creation by just like pre-selling a little bit, that's fine. And in go-to-market stage, again, we operate with more unknown than knowns from the get-go. And you know what? You just make something up. The first approximation of price is something that you will probably do in the range of 20 to 30% of your competition or just like the existing alternative down there. And you will keep your fingers crossed that it will work. So the first type of the price is something that you just want to go down, test if it makes sense and what are the reservations. Later on, you could be playing with more sophisticated analysis, but here is my fundamental problem with this. In the beginning, you didn't know who's your target audience is, who is paying for that, right? So the best you can have is just like this wiggle room from your competition, from whatever you think that the customer will get from this one. And once you build like a couple of pilots, you could be thinking about value pricing and other more sophisticated price mechanisms. But from the beginning on, you know how it is. You need 100 paying customers. So don't overthinking, just practicing, do something and see what happens and make sure that you are not testing this as a survey because you don't even know whom you should be considering as your target persona at the moment. So I'm anti-survey, but I'm definitely into early monetization.
It's a great answer. And you know what? Time is flying for us. We're at the end with our last question here. This has been an awesome podcast.
Well,
like jealously, like I know our listeners have enjoyed this, but I have just thoroughly enjoyed being able to pick your brain for the better part of an hour. So thank you so much for joining us. And
thank you.
So one
That's
question
amazing.
we ask.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's been an awesome conversation. I'm going to have to go back and jot down some more notes. One question we ask all of our guests, and I'm really curious your take, is about happiness and success and how you stay balanced. So you're an author, an advisor, a mentor, public speaker, newsletter writer, teacher. You're also a rural retreat curator, a canine sports coach, and a classical harmony advocate. So one question we ask all our guests is, how do you remain happy and successful in your career? How do you keep balance?
Well, I'm in pension. I don't work anymore. No, just messing around with you. So for me, it's all about protecting my mornings, right? Mornings are so important for me because if I just like wake up and see like these gazillion emails, my brains just get fucked and I can no longer think straight. So it's very important for me in the morning to see some sunlight, to have a little bit of a tranquility. And I don't want to say that I cannot live if I don't have my 1 hour morning routine, but I do function much better if I just like get up, not in this cortisol reactive stage, but something more purposeful, something which is like really more meaningful for me. The second thing, and I'm so happy to have this question because just like today, one of my mentees said that we had like a little bit of a phone call and she said that she's struggling with overspending too much, right? And she's a very successful entrepreneur. Just like her problem is that she spends everything what she makes, right? So it's not like the best mechanism of wealth building. And I was just like, she was asking if she should hire like a financial coach or whatnot. And I was just like, you don't have a money problem, you have happiness problem. You're probably overcompensating for something which is very painful for you, which you feel very frustrated with your job. So try to find these pockets of joy in your life. A lot of them are for free because for me, the privilege is to just like go out with my dogs, enjoy a little bit of the sunshine and eat something which is good and have a little bit of Mozart in my ears. Love Mozart. But nevertheless, I think that these days and nights, I mean, we are so conditioned that we should be doing this and this and that, and this is how we should look, this is what we should do, this is like our extra curriculum activities that we should be engaging in. But at the end, I think it comes down to introspection and just like reflecting on what is really important for our lives. And for like John, it might be that like his child is, right? For Phil, it might be that like he's getting the latest technological gears and the best like podcasts and possible. So not to judge yourself and just like be honest to yourself of what really makes you happy, what sparkles the joy. And you can run a diary if you want. You can hire a therapist if you want. But for me, it's just like, what makes my heart sing? What is this? If I had to relive this day again, what would be the highlights? This is my answer.
Such a cool answer, Maya. We were talking offline that, so we asked this question to like all of our guests, and I feel like I do these like recaps at the end of the season, mashing up everyone's answer together, and there's a lot of common threads and folks like repeat some of the same stuff. You're the first one to talk about introspection in a sense, and a lot of folks mention routine, but the way you broke it down as like morning routine and getting some sunshine before I look at my emails, that's really cool. And I really appreciate that thought there and your answer. And I feel like there's some self-reflection I need to do myself, because like I crawl out of bed and I open my phone, I open Slack, and it's the first thing I do. I haven't even been hit with sun. So really appreciate that.
Yeah. Or just like kiss your partner or pet your animal or whatever. It's just like, there are so many other choices that you could be making. It's just like, this is not the first piece of information that you want to throw yourself in when you're starting the day. You're so gentle when you wake up. So just treat yourself nicely.
Love it. Thank you so much for your time, Maya. This is super fun, awesome chat. Really appreciate your time.